blockades. It follows a UN-brokered deal aimed at easing global food shortages. Government officials say the first shipment should leave from the port of Chornomorsk, with all other ports to begin exports within about 2 weeks. And some of the UK's major cities are all bidding to host Eurovision 2023. Sheffield, Manchester and London all putting their hats in the ring after Britain was asked to replace Ukraine to host the contest. Boris Johnson says the event will celebrate the people of Ukraine. Earlier this year, the UK was runner-up to Ukraine, whose entry, performed by Kalush Orchestra, won the contest. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. We've got my panel, the writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels and Jeevan Sander, the economist at King's College London. Good evening to both of you. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co by now, don't you? It's not just about us here. It's about you at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me with all your thoughts on all the stories, or any of your thoughts, quite frankly, that you seem to have tonight. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email address. You can tweet me as well at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I must apologise, by the way, on the start of this programme, because listen, I've got the most squeakiest chair. I don't know if that's going to translate to you at home, but it is driving me bonkers. I'm going to switch it in the first break. So if you're hearing a really squeaky sound, I do apologise. It's my bottom on this chair, and I'll get it sorted out in the next break. So, as a reminder, in case you've just tuned in, the topics we'll be getting into tonight, the NHS. We can go around and around and around on that one, can't we? What are the answers this time? Its workforce is under the focus. We just don't have enough staff. So that's topic number one. Topic number two I want to get into is Stonewall. If you're not on Twitter, you probably missed what I'm talking about. But at the weekend, they were suggesting that 2-year-olds are basically aware of their trans identity and that perhaps it's time for nursery schools to start being slightly more inclusive with their materials. As a mum to a 2-year-old, this story concerns me no end. And I just want to get into that and have that debate about whether or not this is a good trend or something to be avoided. And I also want to ask you as well about working class MPs. Does it matter whether or not MPs are from the working class or not? Just 7% of overall MPs are from a working class background. You tell me your thoughts on all of that. But let's start tonight, shall we, with the report from the NHS. A study for the House of Commons Health and Social Care Committee says that the NHS is facing, I quote, the greatest workforce crisis in its history, which is putting patients and staff at serious risk. The report found that more than 62,000 positions in England are currently unfulfilled, and there are 700 less full-time GPs than this time 3 years ago. There's also been a bit of criticism that the government apparently does not have a credible strategy to tackle the problem. Jeevan Sander, I'll come back to you first on this one. I mean, every day almost we have a conversation about the NHS. We never really seem to fix the problem, seeing we just go round in circles. Focusing on this workforce one in particular, what do you think to it all?
Yeah, I think this is a problem of pay. We've seen nurses since 2010 have pay cuts of about £2,500, over 40,000 nursing vacancies now, maybe even as high as 50,000. If we aren't paying our public sector staff enough, it costs us all. We don't have people to look after us in our hospitals, widely as well, teaching our schools or police on our streets. This is an issue, a part of funding problem. And one of the other problems we've had over the past decade is that actually whilst our funding as a percentage of our economy has remained the same, we have an ageing population as well, and also an economy that hasn't been growing. So just less money going in there and less funding. And more broadly as well, some real societal problems that lead to this point. You know, when there are 2 million people who need a food bank, that hits their healthcare. If you can't afford to heat your home, that hits your healthcare. And on the top of that, of course, waiting lists now over 6 million and less than 3/4 of people in A&E being seen within 4 hours. I mean, we all know the stories. We all know people who've gone to A&E, who can't get GP appointments, who can't get their hospital treatment when they need it. It's clear funding is a part of that, but also this, it's not just about the NHS, it's also how wider society is doing. I think that's also a reflection of where we are at the moment.
So one of your primary solutions to this would be pay them more. OK, Dominique, where do you stand on it all?
I think the problem with the NHS stems from largely a lack of bravery from politicians, and I think that's because the NHS has turned almost into a religion that cannot be criticised. I think there are some fundamental structural problems with the NHS that need to be addressed, because although, I don't know, people like to criticise the Tories when it comes to funding, but you know, there have been record-level funding increases for the NHS in recent years. I would agree that I don't think the conditions for low-level workers are good enough. I don't think so at all. And I don't think the government has actually made enough effort to both recruit new staff and retain those staff. But at the same time, there's a clear problem of the NHS not being able to meet growing demand, whether that be as our population grows, whether that be as our population ages, and whether that be as the needs of our population in terms of their healthcare changes. And in terms of how to sort of address the situation, as I said before, I do think there needs to be more bravery. Maybe looking at, I mean, this is going to be controversial, but maybe looking at different ways the NHS can function, perhaps looking at more of a French system. The French healthcare system is one of the best in the world. It's been ranked the best in the world by numerous bodies. And the system that they have is a part insurance-based system that is mostly government subsidised. So we do have private healthcare companies in this country. To maybe spread out that demand, perhaps the government could subsidise private healthcare for people who aren't able to access that care as quickly that they need on the NHS.
I mean, Dominique says it's potentially controversial to have conversations about whether or not the NHS should be in its current form. Its current form is described as being free at the point of use. I mean, I would dispute that because it's not free. It's paid for by national insurance contributions, but let's park that for a second. Do you think there's any merit in kind of looking at should the NHS continue as it is, as a so-called free at the point of use? Are there opportunities here for elements of it to be privatised in some way?
I definitely wouldn't agree with the privatisation angle of it. Well, the problem with private insurance, as far as you get it, is your risk pool ends up being not very good. So who is it gets private insurance? The people who kind of can afford it, and those who are kind of need it, i.e. who have greater needs, will be locked out of that system. I would also say here, in the UK, before 2010, we did have an NHS that was functioning. We had record low waiting times. We had hospitals being built. We have an NHS in this country that has functioned well in the past. So my problem is over the past decade, clearly, and it's not just the cuts to the NHS, it's also wider society. And Dominique is right, by the way, to talk about how, for example, we saw record increases. But part of the reason we needed that was because we had such low increases beforehand. And an ageing population, I entirely agree with you, an ageing population, and especially those who now, you know, we're talking about privatisation. One thing that also worries me is the amount of people going into problem debt because they're having to fund out-of-pocket health insurance, in particular as well, those are the lowest incomes. I think it's a real problem.
I think if you had a flexible system whereby those that have enough income to pay for their healthcare about 2 times over, they shouldn't be able to use the NHS. Those that physically cannot afford it should be able to either have the NHS free at the point of use, or those on middle income, say, for example, should have their healthcare partly subsidised by the government. And it works in France. I've a friend who's lived in France his whole life. He's here, but he lived there since he was a child, basically. And comparably, the healthcare system in France, in his opinion, is far better than the NHS. Even here, I can't get an appointment. And yes, I think that's partly to do with government, but I think it's partly to do with the intrinsic issues with the NHS that simply can't be sustained, and we need to be able to have an honest conversation about ways that we can change it. Unfortunately, no politician is really brave enough to have that conversation. It's either, you know, we've done all this funding, so stop complaining, we can't afford a pay rise, or we're just going to throw more money at it, and that clearly isn't solving the issue.
I will say, if we do have this, because also at the moment you can have private insurance if you want to have private insurance. People in the UK do have it, people do get treated privately. Harley Street, I hear, has got some fancy, like, medical places. But even if we were to do that, and I don't think it's a good idea, it wouldn't solve the A&E waiting time problem. It wouldn't solve the other issues we have. And also, if you're someone who can't get a GP appointment at the moment, again, this won't solve the problem you have. The problem you have is there aren't enough doctors and there aren't enough nurses. And there aren't enough of the capacity, but we absolutely need to go forward and get there.
So let me just question this, because this whole sentiment of there's not enough this, there's not enough that, there's not enough the other. One of my concerns in some of this is that qualified healthcare professionals are choosing, for financial reasons, let's be blunt, to either leave the NHS and enter into the private sector or leave the NHS and enter into locum work. When I say locum work, by the way, just in case you're not familiar, what I'm basically saying is essentially like a freelance member of staff. You're basically going into the service when it's got a staff shortage. That's what I mean when I say locum. And I worry, Jeevan, that qualified people are choosing this route for financial gain, and that is then leaving the NHS service suffering. So I ponder, should we get really tough in terms of locum rules? Because people are earning over £1,000 a day. Is it time to start saying, right, if you want to go to locum, it's not a career choice for you. You can only do, I don't know, just say one locum shift a month. So
the problem with the locum system is that actually it's kind of a legacy of there not being enough, right? Because if there were enough doctors and nurses, you don't need locum staff to come in and kind of do that, as it were. Those doctors and nurses who do work in the NHS, like, they're well aware of the fact that, well, I have lots of friends who are both doctors and nurses. They're there to serve the NHS, right? They're there to do it. And when they have done locuming in the past, it's always been like a stepping stone between things, or they needed to pick up some extra shifts for whatever reason.
But I'm questioning whether or not that mindset has changed, because I don't disagree with you. I think many people have gone into the NHS to do good, whatever. But I think now that there are these kind of bells, financial incentive bells ringing in people's ears. If you come and join my agency, you can earn all of this money. You look at your wage slip, you go, hang on a second, why should I work full-time for this? When actually I could go over here, earn this per day, and at some point in the future go back to the full-time role if I choose to. You
don't get any progression in that side either, though. So, for example, if you start as a junior doctor and you locum, you can't progress to being a consultant. You're stuck at that particular rung, and you're in it forever. So, like, I also think that the reason why we need locums is because we just don't have enough. Even if tomorrow, if we were to scrap all this, for example, scrap locum, let's say we do that, we'd still have 40,000 nursing vacancies.
And even then, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with someone wanting to do that type of work because of that financial incentive. I think, look, being a nurse or a doctor, it is more of a vocation than a career that you seek to benefit from financially. But at the same time, as individuals and as human beings, we are motivated by incentive. And one of the biggest things that we need in society, everyone, is money. So I think it's entirely human to be motivated by financial incentive. If you've spent all of that money getting an education, working night and day to get that education and to be qualified, I think you have every right to want to work flexibly because you have those qualifications. The problem is not an honest conversation about the NHS and how it should be restructured. And yeah.
See, what do you think to my little idea? And as I've said, Rishi and Liz can have that. You can have this one on me. I think it'd be a vote winner, actually, if I say so myself. I would say that there's some things in this country that are far more important than any other political party. One of the things is the NHS. And Dominique, you say about it being, it's almost a religion. There's no almost about it. It has become, over years, decades, whatever, it's this kind of holy thing that you can't criticise, you can't seek to fundamentally reform. Jeevan, my little idea is take it out of the current political system, create a cross-party group, its own kind of cross-party budget, whatever you want to call the words, I don't know, and say, right, we're going to do a 10-year strategy. It's irrespective, you can't alter it if you then come into power, whoever you are. It's outside of the political system.
I suppose what do you do when, for example, so now the pay deal for the Conservatives is going to be 5%. I'm assuming if Labour in government, it would be much higher. But the problem is they have
That's part of the strategy that you agree at the outset. So when you're doing your cross-party stuff and we're setting up this entity, which is the NHS or the new healthcare system, whatever you want to call it, things like peer reviews, etc., they're built in stone. You'd figure that out when you're setting it up.
But then
why would there be a consensus? Because at the end of it, you could have this commission, but then there wouldn't be a consensus because the difference between the parties would end up being too great, and it'd be too difficult for them to agree.
I think you could find a consensus because when the NHS was created, yes, it's mostly a Labour idea, but there was a cross-party consensus on how it should be run, and it being created in the first place. But I think the issue with it is that if you set ideas like that in stone about, say, pay increases, for example, or funding on a yearly basis, you then can't respond adequately to changes that are perhaps outside Parliament's control, for example, economic changes, weather
But
disasters,
you'd set up a process
financial
for that. You'd have your
disasters.
business as usual process, then you'd have your exception process. So if there was, I don't know, say a pandemic, if there was whatever, you'd have you'd have a process that you'd use to manage that. What I'm saying is, one of the challenges for me is that it's stuck as a political football within the political system. So now you've got Rishi and Liz talking about, oh, this is what I'm going to do when I come into office for 2 years. And then the next person's going to come along at 2024 and go, oh, this is what we're going to do for the next 5 years. Then this is what we're going to do for the next 5 years. And it's all a little bit ludicrous, really, because you need long-term strategies that are not politically impacted.
But why would they want to change? Sorry to interrupt, but this is interesting because why would either party actually want to change that? Because the NHS in itself has sort of, like you said, has become a religion. It's sort of a way for politicians on either side of the political aisle to participate in moral grandstanding because of the nature of what the NHS is. This idea that, it's free healthcare, you don't have to pay for this, it's, the kind government giving it to you and you should be so, so grateful for it. So I think realistically, no politician on either side of the aisle would want to lose that opportunity to morally grandstand, and that's probably why we won't ever really go to an insurance-based system, which I think would be better comparable to what we have at the moment, because there's too many political opportunities that they would lose.
I suppose also we shouldn't be. I know we denigrate politics a lot. We do it all the time, right? But we shouldn't denigrate politics. We should welcome the disagreement. We should say to each other, people have fundamentally different ideas about the NHS. The Conservative Party has one idea, the Labour Party has another idea. But I think you're right, of course, in terms of we need better long-term planning. What I'm actually saying is, in one sense, we have one consensus, right? And that consensus is the free at the point of use consensus. So there is, in one sense, there is a non-political kind of foundation, but the rest of it, I suppose, we're always going to
I don't even have a consensus with that, actually, across the board, because there should be some things that are... And I use this free at the point of use. It's not free, unless you've just been born, then it's free to you because you've never made a national insurance contribution in your life. But if you're a 60-year-old guy, and I don't know, you break your leg or whatever, you're not getting free care. You're getting care that you've contributed throughout your entire working life to receive. What I would say is some aspects should be paid for with national insurance, Jeevan, but then I would have a huge conversation, a proper conversation about what you want your NHS to be, because at the moment it's been all things to all people, and it shouldn't be. So you can have your free services over there, but when you start bordering into certain services, there should be fees are paid to that, chargeable for that. Professor Stephen, what's his surname, Smith, he today was suggesting following a partial German system, which is you pay up to £8 a night to be in hospital. What would you think to that? Would you be willing to pay to be in hospital? I would also, by the way, introduce charges for missed appointments as well. That would soon sort people out, wouldn't it? Because a lot of the problems in the NHS are people just not attending the appointments that they're supposed to. Karen says, Michelle, you could stop making nursing a degree course. It should be a vocation, not a high-perks job, Chris says. Please, can we stop throwing money at the NHS? You've got all of these diversity jobs. What a waste of money. I won't open that can of worms again because I know you debated that when I was off, didn't you? Carol says, I've recently retired from the NHS as a registered nurse for about 50 years. It's not more money that's needed in the NHS. It's root and branch overhaul of management. The waste in the NHS, Carol says, is phenomenal. Linda says, we shouldn't even call it the NHS. It's become the International Health Service. Everyone seems able to use it these days. Ian says, the NHS, just one more legacy mess that your friend Michelle Boris has left us with. Terry says the NHS has plenty of staff, but just the wrong kind. You can't treat and cure people by pushing a pen around. Irene says, I've seen quite a lot of discussions on your channel about the NHS, Michelle. Why is it never mentioned about the amount of patients sent to private treatments at hospitals for treatments? Well, I think, yeah. By the way, I'll tell you what's not often talked about is the fact that everybody that was going on about lockdowns all the time to protect the NHS, where are all those people now? Because many of their policies didn't protect the NHS at all. It created carnage in it, carnage that we're seeing now and we will be seeing for a long time. But guess what? I suspect there'll be even disagreements on that. So I'll leave it with you to ponder what your thoughts are. I'm going to take a quick break now. When we come back, an issue that's really important to me, actually, is the mum of a 2-year-old. I want to debate Stonewall's claim that 2-year-olds can basically tell whether or not they're transgender and whether nurseries should be doing more on this front. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight in an exclusive interview with Brexit mastermind Lord David Frost, I'll find out why he's backing Liz Truss to become Prime Minister and take the European Union to task. Plus, GB News star Neil Oliver and positive Professor Carol Sikora give their unfiltered take on what's really going on in the world, and I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, former MEP and father of the Prime Minister Stanley Johnson, and senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. We've got the writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels and the economist at King's College London, Jeevan Sander. Good evening to both of you. Lots of you guys getting in contact about that last topic we just did, which was the NHS and how on earth we're going to fix it. I don't mean to be too pessimistic, but I don't see it being fixed anytime soon. I worry, quite frankly, that we're going to be having these conversations for years and years and years to come. One of the comments here was that it's kind of started going wrong in 2010. That was Jeevan. You brought that up at the start of the conversation. But, you know, I can remember winter crises and all the rest of it going back years and years and years, not just in this government. So I worry, so I do, ladies and gentlemen, that we're never really going to get to the heart of it. You tell me, though, are you a little bit more optimistic than me? Have you got a bit more positivity about you when it comes to the NHS? You tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. Right, let's talk about a topic that concerned me personally and lots of others, I have to say, over the weekend. The charity Stonewall, you'll be familiar with that, I'm sure. Well, this weekend they claimed that children as young as 2 can basically tell whether or not they're transgender. As a result of that, Stonewall were calling upon nurseries and schools to introduce what they call LGBTQ+, inclusive and affirming education, which they say, I quote, is crucial for the well-being of all young people. There you go. I'm just showing you that tweet directly, just so that you can read that for yourselves on the screen. It says that research suggests that children as young as 2 recognise their trans identity, yet many nurseries and schools teach a binary understanding of pre-assigned gender. LGBTQ inclusive and affirming education is crucial for the well-being of all young people. Well, quite frankly, I've got a 2-year-old child. Pretty much the only thing that he can recognise with any form of continuity is where the snack cupboard is, which is pretty annoying, I've got to say. But Dominique, on a serious level, this is something that really, as a mum of a 2-year-old, it does concern me. Where do you stand on it all?
I think these people are dangerous.
Who's these people?
The people within Stonewall, organisations like Stonewall that receive taxpayer-funded cash. I think these types of people are dangerous. The ideologies that they spew are extreme, not really founded in any sort of scientific reality. And the fact that they want to then push that extreme ideology onto children is concerning. And I think the people perpetuating this narrative shouldn't be anywhere near children. Might sound harsh, but I'm sorry, it's the truth. The idea that a 2-year-old has any clue about whether or not they're trans, let alone complex topics such as gender and sex, is quite frankly ludicrous. I have a 2-year-old niece as well. She was just with me this weekend. It's completely bonkers to suggest she has any idea about gender identity and sex. So why are grown adults pushing their own extreme beliefs onto children? There was a story recently about Girl Guides publishing an interview with 2 parents who had a child, 5-year-old child, that started identifying as a girl. Now, that child has decided to refer to themselves as Rainbow. That's their female name. Don't mean to be harsh here, but anyone with half a brain cell would understand that even choosing a name such as Rainbow suggests that these are childish fantasies and childish delusions. It may be that when they grow up, they may still feel as though they're in the wrong body. But as a child, adults should not be entertaining this and then responding with things like puberty blockers and gender reassignment surgery. It's child abuse.
Where do you stand on it, Jeevan?
I just remember when my brother was 3 years old, they dressed him up as a girl for the school nativity. But anyway, well, the family nativity, rather.
Is he Mary?
He was, so it was a family play, and they've dressed him up as a girl. I wonder how much he would have known at that age whether or not he was being dressed up as a girl or as a boy. I think actually we accept one of the great things about Britain and the way that we've come and the way we've come forward is how accepting and tolerant we are of people. And I'm sure both of you have maybe different views, but also you both accept and respect trans people. We expect they are part of our society. I think it's very difficult to be a trans person. I couldn't imagine it being so. I wonder, I mean, I have no idea about, what children do and do not know. What I do know is that we kind of want to be respecting and affirming and inclusive of those children when they do come around. I suppose when children are young, we also teach them about, those who are gay and bisexual as well. I suppose the question is when and how are we doing these things? And I think that's what we still have to explore and see where we end up at.
Yeah, see, I'll tell you what concerns me about this as a mum to a little 2-year-old myself. So you're absolutely right, completely respectful. I'm completely respectful of trans people, and I actually feel sorry for them often because this conversation seems to happen about them, and there's something quite unedifying about this. But what I feel very strongly is that most trans people want to be left alone, leave me alone, let me get on with my life, whatever. It's the organisations, it's the activist groups that are doing this, creating a division, sowing a divide, so that they themselves can swoop in and profiteer off the back of this. There's this situation with trans, dear nurseries, allow me to come in and show you the courses that I've developed to give to your children. Workforces, allow me to create this index that I've created so you can mark yourself, and here's some training. And I do think it's dangerous because the article that you read, when you read the article that the Stonewall tweet refers to, it's about a 4-year-old, this article. And the 4-year-old, the parent has written this. The parent is a trans woman themselves, and they're writing about this 4-year-old, that the first time this 4-year-old girl said that she was a boy, and I'm quoting directly, it came unprompted, bubbling from somewhere pure and certain inside of her. My husband and I took to asking whether she felt like a boy or a girl, or neither, to let her know we were listening and keeping tabs on any progress either way. I marvelled at how self-assured she already is. So then it goes on, because the nursery basically wasn't aligned with some of this, and this parent was saying how concerned they were. And I worry about this, Jeevan, because this poor child, you know, 1 minute she's saying I'm a boy, tomorrow she's probably saying she's a unicorn, the next day, if she's anything like my kid, she'll probably think she's a flapjack or at least want to be. And that's just part of being a child. And when you start saying to this child, well, actually, are you a boy or neither, or are you a girl? You're planting in this child an ideology that's based often on a fallacy, because biological sex is real. I'm very conscious I'm speaking at you, I'm ranting everyone, and I'm sorry, I will pause for breath and shut up in a second and let you respond, but I just feel like we're planting this ideology into these children's minds in order to be kind while disrespecting basic, simple facts.
So I mean, I'm not there with the parent of this child. I don't know. I suppose this child also could change their mind very easily and very much so. One thing I find very difficult personally about this is that I have no idea. I can't imagine the experience of being transgender, and I can't imagine if I was transgender when I would have first known about it. And I can see the worries and the concerns, but I honestly don't know. And I don't know what it would mean to be a transgender child, or when those things, or when you start to have those feelings or start to move towards it. And in this case, look, it's very possible that this child either does or does not end up becoming a transgender adult. I have no idea.
The child won't, because a lot of the time, gender dysphoria is triggered by a range of other things, especially for children as well. It might be emotional problems that they're having, problems with their identity growing up. It might be family issues. There was one story of a child who was convinced that they were a girl, and it turned out that began when they began having sessions with a therapist. It turned out that this was actually triggered by the fact that their parents had always wanted a girl, so therefore felt as though they had to live up to their parents' expectations. A lot of the time there are other things going on. Not every single child that expresses an interest in things that are normally attributed to the opposite sex means that they're transgender. And sometimes it may be that those children also then grow up to be gay or lesbian. And there's a very big difference between that and simply believing you're a different sex altogether. And I think we tend to forget that as well. Expressing interest in things that are attributed to another gender doesn't mean you're transgender. It could just mean you grow up to then be lesbian or gay. It doesn't have to always be about being trans.
Did you want to come back on that, Jeevan?
No, I think the position is that actually one thing I'm still very glad about is the fact that we have moved so far on this so quickly, in the sense of, you know, when I was much younger, even being a homosexual was something that was kind of frowned upon amongst older generations. And it seems now we've become very accepting of those who are transgender. We are trying to be tolerant, we're trying to be kind. And they're also realising there are difficulties and debates and discussions that have to be had. And I'm, you know, hoping that we can do so in a respectful way. And I think we have done, by the way. And I think we should, continue in that spirit.
Yeah, I just, you know, this notion of be kind. I want to be kind.
You are kind.
Thank you, Jeevan. Can I have that on my gravestone, please? Jeevan Sam says I am kind, so I'll take that. It's good enough for me. But there is surely a limit to where, because I know a lot of the younger generation today, they will say, well, people can be who they want to be, and, you know, why. And I just think that's fine, but there are some basic things that are just simple facts. You might not like them, but they're simple, basic facts. Biological sex for me is a simple, basic fact. And when I start thinking, well, people can be whoever they want and identify however they want, where is the line to this? Is that you're saying you're proud and pleased of the progress that we've made. We've got thousands and thousands and thousands of young children on a waiting list for Tavistock Clinic, where potentially they're going to be prescribed with hormones, you know, all manner of things that have a real impact on these children. And I worry for them, Jeevan. This is coming from a place of worry.
I understand. I think actually there are some very difficult questions around here, and I don't think it's as easy as me just saying, let's all be kind and respectful. I think there are some really difficult decisions and issues here. I'm hoping that we get to a place where we have kind of those debates and discussions in a way and in a depth that kind of should be afforded it. And I'm hoping for.
It's hard to do that when there are really extreme people like those within Stonewall that are in positions of moral authority over people. Because if you don't subscribe to what Stonewall says, that means you're a transphobe nowadays. And it's hard to be kind and understanding to people that want access to children and want to fill their mind with rubbish, like you can change your gender to be whatever you want to be at whatever age you want. That's not reality. And it's dangerous. It's manipulating children into believing things that aren't true. It's almost like when children think that they've got an imaginary friend and the parents there telling them that the imaginary friend is real just because they want it to be. That's really not how life works. And I'm personally tired of being kind to people that aren't kind actually to people that have a different opinion, specifically women who are impacted by this extreme gender ideology, but also people that think that those who disagree with them are intrinsically evil and there's just something morally wrong with them. I'm sick of being understanding with these types of people because they're not understanding towards me.
Stonewall did put a corrective statement out, by the way, on their own Twitter. They wanted to clarify what they meant. You can view it yourself at their Stonewall Twitter account in full. It's quite long. But basically what they're saying is that they believe that all young children should be able to play, explore and learn about who they are and the world around them without having adult ideas imposed on them. I would say, Stonewall, then you need to kind of lead by example there with your own words, because lots of this is very much adult ideas being imposed on children, and it makes me worry for these children, I have to say. Steve says the best way to protect our children is to prevent Stonewall from having any influence on government policy at all. Steve, I could not agree with you more. If you were here, I'd high-five you with both hands, I can tell you that. Ray says a 3-year-old hasn't got a clue about some of this stuff. These ridiculous proposals to influence babies, children are borderline child abuse. Keith says, please, can't we just let small children have fun and enjoy being alive? The world's a confusing enough place once we start getting older. You're not wrong there. James says, to me, this is a form of child abuse. I have to say that sentiment is coming through thick and fast. Billy says a child of 2 is just about walking and talking, never mind learning their transgender identity. Dave says, why are Stonewall getting taxpayers' cash to help fund them? Robert says, if you and the rest of the media would shut up about it, it would go away. Robert, I have to say, this is a view shared by many. I think Jeevan would probably love not to be talking about this topic. There is a sense out there from people that say if the media stopped talking about it, it wouldn't be a thing. Well, I have to say, I personally believe that adults have a responsibility and a duty of care to children. So, unfortunately, I absolutely won't stop talking about some of the things that are going on in our nurseries, in our schools. I think some of it is deeply inappropriate, and the last thing that we should be doing is turning a blind eye to it and ignoring it. However, on Dewbs & Co, I do like respectful disagreement. So, Robert, you are entirely within your rights to disagree with me. Right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about a new report that found that just 1% of Tory MPs come from a working class background and 7% of MPs overall. Does it matter or not? You tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. We've got the broadcaster Dominique Samuels and the economist at King's College London, Jeevan Sander. Good evening again to both of you. Right, coming up at 7 o'clock, we've got Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us?
Good evening. Well, the first thing we'll talk about is the health service, the impending massive problems that we've got. And I'm going to ask the question, are you thinking about going private, as we see a 39% increase in people using private GP services in the last year? And I'll be asking, why is Rishi Sunak impersonating me, wearing a wax jacket, pulling pints in a pub, and even including me in a campaign video about immigration? I'll be joined by Mark Francois, a Liz Truss supporter. We'll debate that and much else.
Oh, imitation. It's the, what's that saying, imitation? The truest form of flattery or something like that. I don't know. Consider yourself flattered, Nigel. I'll see you at 7 o'clock tonight. Right, let's move on, shall we? New research has found that just 1% of Conservative MPs come from a working class background. The Institute for Public Policy Research say 13% of Labour MPs had a working class job before they were elected. That figure, though, has halved since the 80s. Earlier on today, get this, I found this very odd indeed. Nadine Dorries on Twitter pointed out the following. This is a tweet for those of you listening, not watching. She says, Liz Truss wears earrings that cost around £4.50 from Claire's Accessories, she says. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wore expensive Prada shoes on a building site and owns a suit that costs £3,500. So she's basically pitting one against the other there in the tweet, talking about how much shoes and earrings cost. And also, if we look at this, well, this is something Rishi Sunak himself said in a documentary back in 2001.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are working class, but I'm not working class, but I mix and match, and then I go to see kids from an inner city state school and tell them, to apply to Oxford and talk to them about people like me, and then I shock them at the end of chatting to them for half an hour and tell them I was at Winchester, and, one of my best friends is from Eton or whatever, and then they're like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay. So he has friends from working class, well, not really working class. Does any of this matter? Does it matter if you want to be an MP, or indeed the Prime Minister, by the way, whether you're working class or not?
Firstly, the problem with this research is it says working class jobs. And, I mean, I'm not really sure what that actually means or actually proves, because you could be, a Conservative MP actually criticised this and said that you could have worked as a bloody coal miner 10 years ago, since stopped, and then you wouldn't have actually been included in this research. So that is a big problem with it. But I think that the general point is, look, it shouldn't matter on the whole, because I don't think where you come from should impact your ability to have empathy for people from different backgrounds that have different issues. However, big however, as someone from a working class background myself, and as someone who is a Conservative from a working class background, I do feel as though there is a slight disconnect between the people that are making the policies, and whether that be on the left or the right, actually, and the people that are actually impacted by those policies. A lot of these politicians that are making the policies have no clue what it's like really to go to a job centre, for example, have no clue how actually difficult it is to claim disability benefits, for example. My mum is disabled, has to claim disability benefits. Luckily, I'm able to help her out a bit now that I'm older, but still, the way she's treated as a genuine disabled person, I think, is absolutely disgusting. A lot of these politicians don't understand that, so therefore can't really, even though they may have the greatest intentions, develop policy that actually help the people that they want to help. And I think that's a fair point that, anyone can really make. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on.
Jeevan?
I think we should make a greater a great effort to do so. I think exactly the same reason that Dominique has identified, like how it's not the fact that any individual is individually wrong because they come from a certain background. It's that actually, as a whole, is Parliament reflecting the society in which we live in, and therefore does it represent their interest? And particularly think about this cost of living crisis, incredibly difficult. But if you're an MP on 80,000, it's very difficult to think about what it would mean for someone on 30Ks on an average wage. And I think those are some real worries, especially around, I think one thing also, Brexit as well. There's probably a reason why, for example, we had this huge shock, because actually Parliament may not have been as reflective as it should have been at the country at large. I think one thing that the last Labour government...
You say we got a shock. I mean, you might have got a shock. I didn't think Brexit was a shock. Talking to the people that I know, I actually don't think I know anyone, apart from maybe one or two people at the time, that voted Remain. So you say it was a shock. I say it wasn't, and maybe this is reflective of what we're saying. Maybe it was because Parliament didn't kind of grasp it or reflect those kind of views that it was indeed a shock to so many.
I think that's right. I think it's actually a shock to like what was at that point basically an elite consensus, right? The elite thought a certain way about the world, and then when Brexit became a live issue, they realised, well, they kind of thought it was going to be very, very close, but there was a reason why the views in Parliament were very different to the country at large, and I wonder why that was. And I think it should be. We should make a real effort to do so. One thing I think we did very well, or getting much better at certainly, is the number of women in Parliament. More than half the Labour Party are now women, 35% overall. I think we made a massive effort to do so, and we got there. And I think actually the same thing we should be doing for people from socioeconomic backgrounds as well, and making that effort to get them involved.
What does that effort mean? Sorry, Dominic.
Yeah.
Are you advocating quotas?
I'm not advocating quotas. I'm saying that it would generally be the Labour Party, because, of course, they are like the centre-left party, so they will end up invariably reflecting those who are on low and middle incomes. But it's up for them to kind of encourage those people to kind of come forward. They did so with all-women shortlist. Now, I'm not saying you would have an all-working class shortlist, but there should be certainly encouragement.
Yeah. I think all-women
trade unions are
appalling.
Yeah, I don't like that. I do think the overarching principle should be you should pick, whoever's best at the actual job, not just because they have a particular characteristic, though I do understand the sentiment. But I think one point is important here, and it's that just because you come from a particular background, whether that be, you being black, working class, gay, lesbian, whatever, I don't think that necessarily means that you are the best person to represent someone. For example, someone like Nigel Farage, who connected extremely well with working class people across this country. He's someone that comes from immense privilege and wealth, yet he was able to connect more with people from working class backgrounds than, say, someone like Keir Starmer, who comparatively does have more of a working class background than Nigel Farage. So I think part of it is actually, again, listening to the concerns of people and actually making an effort to understand them. And I think that there is sort of a consensus at the moment amongst the establishment that they know best, and that the plebs at the bottom don't know best. They don't actually know what's good for them. And that's why we need the elites in Parliament making all of the decisions. And I think we're only just really starting to push back on that, as was seen with Brexit. And I think it's a good thing.
I'd agree, though, with so when I said I agree the best person for the job, by the way. One thing I think of, for example, someone like Angela Rayner. I'm incredibly impressed by Angela Rayner. I think she's a brilliant person, not just an inspiring story, but an incredibly talented politician. Acuity, a great way of speaking, and everything.
A great way of speaking?
I think she has a great way of getting
I
to
like
an issue.
Angela Rayner.
I like Angela Rayner. And I will say this, I think the thing I'm saying is that actually we should be encouraging more Angela Rayners into Parliament. My worry is not that they're not the best, my worry is the barriers that face them. It's quite expensive to run for Parliament, it's quite difficult to get yourself involved. It's also, do you take a risk to get there?
What are you talking about? So when you run for Parliament, as I've done twice, yes, you need to fund it, but I'm assuming that you're talking about people going into political parties, in which case the cost will be borne by the political parties. If you decide that you want to run, you don't have to scrabble around your piggy bank to try and fund your own campaign. You have huge monumental party machines that will kick in to help you do that. Anyway, look at that. I've just realised the time. I was just about to start ranting about who can apply for Parliament or not. Anyway, by the way, you mentioned Labour, even having all-woman shortlist. Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, the knots that they tie themselves into in 2024 trying to have an all-woman shortlist? Goodness gracious me. Where would they even begin with that? I'll leave that alone for another day. Margaret says, I hate using that word class, Michelle. Please, can you define the working class? To me, we're all working class. I agree with that. John says, Michelle, have you got any working class mates now that you've made it? John, to have any mates at all would be a fine thing. That's what I say. Right, that's all I've got time for. Have yourselves a fantastic evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Showers easing overnight, and it will be a cool night, especially in sheltered spots, but then increasingly sunny on Tuesday. For many places, it'll be a dry day. Still, though, the odd shower around because low pressure has been moving into Scandinavia. That has brought some lively weather to the east of Scotland, northern England during the day, and that weather then sinking south into central areas overnight. So an area of clouds, some showers, but most of the showers easing across northwest England into the Midlands and East Anglia. Showers also continuing to arrive into the northwest of Scotland, in between some clear spells and in some sheltered spots away from urban areas, temperatures in the single figures. So a fresh start to Tuesday. But for many, it's a dry start. There will be a lot of cloud, I think, for much of England, especially the north, central and southeastern areas. That cloud eventually breaking and lifting so that there'll be some sunny spells coming through, but also a few showers through the Midlands, northwest England, for example. A few more showers also for Scotland. But away from these showers, for many parts of the UK, sunny spells, particularly for Wales and the southwest, and feeling pleasant in the sunshine because it will be less breezy compared with Monday. And with the breeze easing and with actually some long clear spells on Tuesday night, well, it's going to be a much cooler night once again. And so temperatures in urban areas staying up at 10 to 13 Celsius, but in the countryside, particularly in sheltered spots, those temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures.